Australian bikini model is pleading guilty to intercourse with a teenage boy. Megan Sky Blancada is a bikini model and actress from Australia. She has starred in films such as Wolf Creek. She has modelled for Mitsubishi and is also apparently an author. She's 34 years old and is apparently a mother. On her Instagram, she states she's a fitness model and states that she likes to keep a low profile. She's recently been accused of unlawful intercourse with a 16-year-old boy. Now, it's also alleged that she also had inappropriate images of children on her phone. The abuse is alleged to have taken place in Adelaide between July 2021 and November 2023, so a total of 2 years. Her lawyer has advised that she will plead guilty to the charges of unlawful intercourse and 2 indecent assaults. She is actually due to go back into court in May this year.
These are the weirdest things kids ever brought to school, part 1. Up first, during World War II, schools would have kids bring in all kind of trash like scrap metal, rubber, paper, and virtually anything they could get their hands on. They did this so these materials can be recycled into weapons and machinery. So these young children would literally bring in metal to help win World War II for America. Next up, elementary school students were at recess one day when one of the kids decided to take a hornet's nest into the school. This resulted in teachers and students getting stung and just sending the whole entire school into a panic. But the real question is, why in the world would this young kid bring a whole hornet's nest into the school? Up first, this teacher told her class to bring the oldest thing they could find in the school the next day. And you won't believe what this one kid brought. Believe it or not, this boy brought his old neighbor to school that day because it was the oldest thing that he could find. Next up, this middle schooler brought a voodoo doll to school one day, and he then said he's going to use it against the principal. The principal then found out about this and the young boy was expelled from school, which makes sense if you bring a voodoo doll to school and say you're going to use it on the principal. Finally, this middle school girl had a 2-month-old sister, and everybody in her class wanted to see it. So one day before school, she put it in her backpack and brought it to school to show everybody. Long story short, her mom was not happy about this nor the school, and she was then suspended for 5 days.
This man shot his colleague's boyfriend after she rejected him. 37-year-old Kevin Prasad worked with Thandar Singh at San Francisco International Airport. The pair had been working together for years, and multiple times Kevin had asked Thandar out on dates. She always rejected his advances. She was happily in a relationship with 31-year-old Mark Mangakat. The pair even had a 3-year-old daughter and soon planned to move to Vegas. Despite his interest in his girlfriend, Kevin never actually had an argument or a disagreement with Mark. There were no warning signs for what was to come. On the 25th of April 2018, Mark went to the airport to pick his girlfriend up from work. Little did he know he was being followed. Kevin had hatched a murderous plan to stop his crush moving away with her boyfriend. Kevin and an alleged accomplice, Donovan Rivera, followed the pair home that day. As Mark was reversing his car into the garage, Kevin fired shots into the car. This killed Mark, and it is a miracle that no bullets hit Thandar. The killer fled the scene, and Thandar hadn't spotted that it was actually her work colleague. When investigators quizzed her about any potential enemies that Mark may have had, she mentioned Kevin almost as an afterthought. She said, "There is a fellow at work who has an interest in me, but he would never do that." A jury recently found Kevin guilty of murder and he will be sentenced in November.
I honestly think this guy is every single one of us as parents. He brutally attacked a family friend who he'd found sexually assaulting his 11-year-old son. Raymond Frolander was 18 and from Daytona Beach in Florida. He was like a family friend to Jason and his son, and he was often around at their place. On this particular day, Jason's son had friends round, and Raymond was also in the house. After the friends had left, Jason went to check on Raymond and his son, who were in another room, and he found something horrifying. Raymond had his pants down, and his young son was completely undressed. Jason immediately flew into a rage and he attacked Raymond, leaving him beaten, swollen, and bloodied. He said the only reason he didn't kill him was because his son asked him not to. Jason then called 911 and said, "I've got him in a bloody puddle for you, officer. He's knocked out on the floor." Jason's son told police officers that Raymond had actually been abusing him for 3 years, since the age of 8. Raymond was arrested, and Police Chief Mike Chitwood, when asked about Raymond's beating, said, "Jason was acting like a dad. I don't see anything we should charge him with. He did what he had to do." Raymond pleaded no contest to lewd molestation of a child under 12 years old, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison.
Imagine going to a grocery store and when pulling out a shopping cart to use, you find a dead body. On March 12th at around 4:15 p.m., that's exactly what happened to somebody in Chico, California. Upon pulling out a shopping cart at a Food Max grocery store, they discovered a body wrapped in a white plastic sheet inside of it. When police arrived, they discovered the body of 61-year-old Daniel Nile, who'd been dead and left in the cart for several days prior. According to authorities, he suffered visible injuries, although his cause of death has yet to be released pending an autopsy report. Police were able to review video footage from the grocery store and saw this man, Timothy Waichert, abandon the shopping cart inside the store. The video then shows an employee of the store moving the cart outside, where it sat for 2 days before the discovery. Timothy is facing multiple charges, including murder. He's also being charged with the attempted murder of a 28-year-old woman in a separate incident. On March 12th, a woman came home and found a truck in her driveway and Timothy outside strangling a woman on the ground. The truck belonged to Daniel, and a large amount of blood was found in the back of it. Inside of the truck was Daniel's dog, and luckily the woman did survive. If convicted of both crimes, Timothy faces 2 life terms in prison.
This is real footage of Robert Oppenheimer testing the first ever atomic bomb.
They had to commit themselves and their experiments to the test. July 13th, they began the final assembly. The bomb was hooked up to a crane which would lift it to the tower. July 14th, finally the ride to the top. Cables, detonators, informer, initiator hookup. July 15th, final dry runs. Tension. Everything ready. July 16th, a rainstorm with spectacular lightning delayed the test from 2 a.m. to 5:29 a.m., just before dawn. Dignitaries from the scientific world watched from the hills. Participants and watchers were instructed to lie on the ground, facing away from the tower. Only after the initial flash could they look at the developing fireball through welder's goggles. A flare in the sky signaled the final countdown. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. The flash was later calculated to be brighter than 1,000 suns. Miles away, a young girl, blind from birth, saw the flash. Men at the site felt the heat of a desert sun. Then came the shockwave. 2 GIs at the command.
Now, this is a crazy gorilla story. In 2011, the gorilla Boquito behind me broke out of a Netherlands zoo. Now, he ran crazy in the crowd, but he hunted down one woman specifically, pinned her to the ground, and then mauled her. It was later revealed the woman was actually a constant visitor at the zoo, visiting about 4 times a week and making eye contact with this gorilla. Now, if you know anything about gorillas, they are very dominant. Eye contact is a sign of aggression. They look at it as a challenge, and the zookeepers even warned her to not make eye contact with Boquito. She was also smiling at him, and usually when gorillas or monkeys show their teeth, it's also a sign of aggression. Following the attack, they made a lot of masks so viewers could shield their eyes. This is so that they could look at the gorillas without having, an aggressive response like Boquito did. They said it was Boquito proof. And of course, Boquito proof went on to win one of the best words of the year in 2007. Very random, I know. But the picture behind me is an actual picture of Boquito roaming the streets. I also don't know why this lady was pulling him to the zoo 4 times a week. Maybe she was actually there to taunt the gorilla, I have no idea. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
The man who attempted to murder a teenager and left her for dead in the woods has been released. It's a miracle that Ashley Reeves survived an attempted murder, but now her attacker is walking free. It was the 29th of April 2006 in Belleville, Illinois. At around 2 a.m, officers found 17-year-old Ashley Reeves just moments from death. She'd been left in the woods to die for over 30 hours. Paramedics rushed her to hospital and placed her in an induced coma. She was actually in such a bad way that they'd initially thought she was dead. 2 days prior to this, Ashley told her parents that she had an interview to attend. She was in a relationship with a boy called Jeremy Smith at the time, and she took his car to drive herself to the interview. When she didn't come home, her parents were extremely worried. They called authorities and began the hunt. Officers later discovered her boyfriend's abandoned car, and inside were a change of clothes that Ashley had taken to change into after her interview. That's when they discovered Ashley nearby. She'd been strangled with a belt and had her neck broken, but miraculously she was still alive. Police discovered a man named Samson Shelton was the last person to contact her. He was her teacher and a professional wrestler. They arrested him on suspicion of attempted murder. He changed his story multiple times before eventually admitting to strangling the poor girl. He said he broke her neck with his arm. He said the pair had gotten into an argument over a relationship they were having. He said they had sex, and then after the vicious attack, he had thrown her into the woods. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but has recently just been released on parole after serving just 17 years. It truly is a miracle that Ashley managed to survive this attack, and her story was made into a movie named Left for Dead: The Ashley Reeves Story.
This is John Cooey, a pedophile and murderer who committed one of the worst crimes in American history. On February 24, 2005, 5-year-old Jessica Lunsford disappeared from her home in Florida. For weeks, friends and family searched extensively for Jessica across the state of Florida, but nothing was found and nobody had any idea what had happened to her. That is, until John Cooey was eventually arrested, a guy who lived 65 yards away from Jessica's home. And after some interrogating, John told the full story, and let me warn you, it's really graphic and disturbing. So on the night of the abduction in 2005, John had apparently intended on robbing Jessica's family home. But he told investigators that when he noticed Jessica in the house, he acted on impulse and took her. Like I said, John was practically a neighbor to the Lunsford family. He lived 65 yards away. And what he did to her in this trailer that he lived in is horrific. John said that after taking 9-year-old Jessica, he essayed her in his trailer, then went to bed, kept her in the bed, and then essayed her again in the morning. He then locked her in a closet and left for work, and when he came back from work, nobody knows exactly what happened, but he held Jessica hostage for 3 days. After 3 days, he tricked her into getting into 2 garbage bags and told her that he was going to bring her home, but obviously he wasn't going to do that. He then buried her alive in the front of his property and let her die under all of that dirt. For all of the weeks that her family was searching for her, they had no idea that Jessica was only yards away from their home. Eventually, after his confession, the family got some sort of a closure when they discovered Jessica's body, but yeah, they couldn't take back what John had done to their daughter. Throughout the trial, tears flowed from friends and family, and this was just a horrific and sad ordeal for that small community in Florida. John was eventually sentenced to life in prison, and he died in prison a few years ago, but sadly, the mark of his crimes will remain in Florida forever.
This is the moment right before this woman was fatally shot live on TV. Allison Parker was a budding young journalist from Martinsville, Virginia. She graduated from James Madison University, and in 2014 she started working on air. This was for the morning show of WDBJ7. It was early in the morning of the 26th of August 2015 when Allison and her cameraman, 27-year-old Adam Ward, were preparing for a broadcast. Allison had actually just celebrated her 24th birthday and she was getting back into the swing of work. The pair were due to cover the 50th anniversary of the Smith Mountain Lake. In the middle of a live interview though, something horrific would take place. It was around 6:45 a.m. and during the live broadcast, a man in black approached. Terrifyingly, he was carrying a gun. Suddenly, he fired at Allison and he then turned the weapon onto Adam. He fired shots at the woman that was being interviewed, called Vicky Gardner. She actually thought quickly and played dead on the floor. Terrifyingly, the camera was still rolling and broadcasting to the horrified viewers at home as Allison and Adam lay dead. The gunman then fled the scene. The cameras were cut by the control room and the live feed cut back to the stunned journalists in the studio. They understandably could not process what had just happened. Police raced to the scene and Vicky was rushed to hospital and thankfully survived her gunshot wound. The other journalists at the news station thankfully actually recognised who the gunman was. They told police the shooter was Vester Flanagan. He'd actually previously worked for the news station until he was sacked for making staff feel uncomfortable. He had a history of being sacked from jobs due to bizarre behaviour and threatening people. It transpired that Vester had planned out his shooting in detail. He tweeted a confession shortly after and posted a video of the shooting to his Facebook. Police were obviously desperate to track him down, but before they could do so, he crashed his car and unalived himself.
All 4 passengers in that helicopter died just after that video stopped. And sadly, one of them was on her way to meet her groom at the wedding altar. Rosemira Nascimento de Silva was 32 years old when this happened. She was on the way to meet her fiancé Uderli Damasceno at the altar that day. You see, Rosemira and her fiancé had planned an epic wedding. There were 300 guests in attendance and Rosemira wanted to make a grand entrance. So that day, to surprise her fiancé, she actually hired a private helicopter. This helicopter was to take her right to the wedding altar. She was to arrive at her destination, get off of the helicopter, then walk down the aisle to meet her fiancé. But unfortunately, she would never make it. You see, at some point during that helicopter flight, the pilot encountered terrible weather. As you can see in that footage before, the visibility was extremely low. The thought is that he may have collided with a tree and was flying really close to the ground, but it's still unknown exactly what caused the crash. But afterwards, all 4 passengers on that helicopter were dead, including the bride-to-be. Sadly, only about 6 people involved with the wedding actually knew that this helicopter grand entrance was happening. Uderli, her fiancé, was actually at the altar waiting for his bride. And as the minutes passed, as he waited longer and longer, he began to grow suspicious. He actually had no idea that this helicopter entrance was happening. It was meant to really surprise him amongst others. But sadly, he was eventually told while at the altar that the helicopter had gone down and that his fiancé was dead. This is really a tragic story. The bride died, the bride's brother died, the pilot died, and the wedding photographer died as well. And the photographer was 6 months pregnant. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms. The situation in Ohio after that grisly train accident that just occurred is a lot worse than the government is telling us. Animals on farms, fish in the rivers, and all other sorts of life forms are dropping dead in the area. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack here and there's just so much going on, but let me tell you about another infamous Ohio train accident. This is the story of the death car, or the accident that boiled 27 people alive. So this is the train car known as the death car. It's in Cleveland, Ohio. I've actually visited the place and I spent the night there ghost hunting. But back in the year 1943, an incident happened close to Cleveland. To sum the incident up, back on that day in 1943, a freight train was traveling along the train tracks as well as a passenger train. But the freight train missed a stop signal. This was an operator, a human error, and unfortunately, the freight train collided with the passenger coach train. When the collision occurred, as you can see right here, the actual steam engine was ripped open and all of that hot steam poured into the passenger car. Because the passengers were trapped in the car with nowhere to go, 27 people were essentially boiled alive by hot steam. This incident was insanely gruesome and those people lost their lives in one of the worst ways imaginable. This is what the inside of the death car looks like today. It's been refurbished. You can actually go take a ride on it if you want. But the train car gained infamy as people began to report experiencing paranormal activity inside. Inside of the death car, people have reported hearing screaming, they've seen shadow figures, they've experienced all sorts of paranormal activity. So that's why when I visited Cleveland, I knew that I had to stop by the death car and spend the night. If you want to see the full video that I did on the death car featuring my overnight footage of the ghost hunting and some history told by historians who actually work at the Preservation Society, here it is right here. Just search this up, or Paranormal Files Death Car. It's such a crazy episode, and we actually had one of our tripods while we were filming knock over by itself. It wasn't, stabilized improperly or anything like that. You can see on camera it actually tilt and then fly over. So this place is definitely haunted, and if you want to hear more about a train accident in Ohio that was deadly, this is the video for you.
This is the scariest phone call ever made. This is the 1997 Art Bell call, or also referred to as the Area 51 caller. So on September 11th, 1997, famous radio host Art Bell got a call from a caller, and this wasn't a normal caller. He was very creepy, panicky, and frantic. And he claimed he worked at Area 51. In the call, he starts to say how the government are hiding these things, and saying that things aren't as they really seem. However, what really got people thinking was that right when he was about to get into the juicy details, the whole entire radio station loses connection. And I mean completely loses connection. Then the station gets a backup connection and you hear Art Bell talking to the other radio host saying how weird that was. I'm going to show you the call right now, so here it is.
Line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art?
Yes.
Hi.
I don't have a whole lot of time. Well, look, let's begin by finding out whether you're using this line properly or not. Area 51. Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now? A former employee. Former? But they're not doing anything. They are not. They want the major population centers wiped out so that the few that are left will be more easily controllable. Discharge. I started getting... In some way, something knocked us off the air, and we're on a backup system now. It's the government, or... I don't know.
This is the exact moment that 11-year-old Carly Brucia was kidnapped. On February 1st, 2004, Carly had been staying the night with a friend in Sarasota, Florida. At around 6:15 p.m., she began the 1-mile walk back to her house to watch the Super Bowl with her family. After she left, her friend's mom called Carly's mom to make sure it was okay that she walk back by herself, but Carly's mom didn't want her to walk alone on Bee Ridge Road as it's super busy. So she sent Carly's stepdad to go and pick her up. But Carly was nowhere to be found. Within 30 minutes, Carly's parents reported her missing and a massive search was launched. Police brought in bloodhounds, which tracked her scent to Evie's car wash, which is also along Bee Ridge Road, but her scent disappeared behind the back of the business. Authorities reviewed video footage from the car wash's security cameras and found this. This all took place just a few minutes after leaving her friend's house. Also caught on video was a yellow Buick pulling into the parking lot 3 minutes before Carly was abducted. Authorities issued an Amber Alert, but sadly it was too late. Upon releasing the security footage to the public, the man in the video was identified as Joseph Smith. Joseph was on probation for unrelated drug charges at the time of Carly's abduction, and he had previous charges of kidnapping and false imprisonment. He'd been released from prison only 13 months prior and had already violated his probation twice, which should have sent him back to prison, but police didn't do anything about those violations. When tracking down Joseph, police found he was already in custody for drug charges after being arrested 2 days after the abduction of Carly. A few days later, Joseph admitted to sexually assaulting and strangling Carly to death and led authorities to her body. She was found behind a church nearly 3 miles from the abduction site. Carly was found deceased, laying on her back, nude from the waist down, and had a deep ligature mark on her neck. DNA evidence found on Carly and in Joseph's vehicle confirmed his story, and he was then arrested for her abduction and murder. He was convicted on all charges and sentenced to death, but in 2021, he died in prison while awaiting execution. Joseph has since been named a suspect in the unsolved murder of 25-year-old Tara Riley, who was found in a retention pond behind a Walmart in Bradenton, Florida in 2000.
Catálogo de Televisa or the Televisa catalog.
Oh, fuck, bro. I'm nervous, bro. Fuck.
So at first, this just started as just like a Twitter conspiracy, saying how Televisa had this catalog that they would show different actresses, different singers who were involved with Televisa.
Okay.
Mainly it was women. They would have different pictures of them.
Okay.
And it all started with a singer. Her name was Lucerita. That was the first picture that came out. And it just said that, oh, I think she was a virgin at the time. Basically what the Televisa catalog was
it like a catalog where people could find these people and have sexual acts with them?
yeah, you choose what girl you want and you would pay.
This is basically sex trafficking.
Yes, bro. Certain people started voicing shit on the news. There was this lady, her name was Alejandra Avalos. She's an actress, a singer, and she was also involved with Televisa. But in 2017, she ended up getting kicked out because she spoke up about it, saying how she was invited before. And I'm gonna show you the thing live where she was interviewed and shit.
Me habló una señora de las famosas representantes de artistas y me dijo que había un catálogo de Televisa, que si yo quería participar. Muy amablemente le dije que yo no me manejaba bajo esos estándares sexuales o de favores sexuales. Uno accediera. Ella me decía que había hasta $1,000,000 por noche.
She basically confirmed that there's some weird shit going on between like the women that work for Televisa.
What the fuck?
Yeah, bro.
This New Jersey father is now on trial after his son's death because he increased the treadmill speed way too much. This is 31-year-old Christopher Greger, and he will be charged for abusing and killing his 6-year-old son back in 2021. Sheriffs got a report from a medical facility that a 6-year-old just died from blunt force trauma. They came to investigate what happened. The mother also noticed bruising around the child every time he was with his father, so she tried to get sole custody. However, this sole custody was denied. She was worried for the child's safety. When the mother dropped him off on April 2nd at 4 p.m., the boy went limp at 5 p.m., an hour later, and then died shortly after at the hospital. Surveillance footage from the clubhouse gym saw the father increasing the speed of the treadmill 6 different times after the kid fell 6 different times. The kid had blunt force trauma all over his body, and his liver and his heart were also damaged from it. Some people are arguing that he died from sepsis caused by pneumonia. Either way, this is child neglect and abuse, having him run to the treadmill, falling, and then putting him back on and increasing the speed. Your child is not Sonic the Hedgehog. His charge will be murder and child neglect. He'll probably get life in prison. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
The Austin 9/11 is a true crime story that's always interested me, and I can't believe more people don't know that this happened. We're going to be talking about some sensitive topics here, so viewer discretion is advised. This is Andrew Joseph Stack III, and in 2010 he flew a plane into a building in Austin, Texas. Joseph Stack, the pilot of the plane, was a normal guy. He was highly intelligent, he worked as a software consultant, he had started multiple tech companies in his life, but he had always found himself in trouble with the IRS. You see, Joseph Stack just wasn't good at paying his taxes or being responsible with his money, which led him to get into trouble with the IRS and the US government. At one point, the government even shut down one of his businesses because he wasn't paying taxes. So obviously, he hated the IRS. On the morning of February 18th, 2010, Joseph Stack started off the day by setting his house on fire, and he published a note that he had typed online. The note was long and rambling, and he talked about how he hated the government, he hated the IRS, he didn't trust anybody and all of this. But I'm going to read you this one quote that I thought was really disturbing. He says, "Well, Mr. Big Brother IRS man, let's try something different. Take my pound of flesh and sleep well." So after setting his house on fire, Joseph Stack then drove to a local airport where he kept his Dakota Piper plane. He had a pilot's license, and he took off at around 9:45 a.m. This is his route from the morning. He sets his house on fire, drives up to get the plane, and then flies down here to the IRS office. While in the air, he talked to the control tower. He said he was headed southbound, and his final words were, "Thanks for the help, have a great day." At just around 10 a.m., he collided with Echelon 1, a federal office building which included IRS tax offices. He was going full speed. He lowered really fast. Here's the actual flight path, and he collided right here with the building, which resulted in a massive explosion and fireball. This explosion sent debris flying everywhere. Apparently, pieces of the building hit cars that were driving on the nearby highway, and one employee that was working in the building at the time died. The attack took the life of Joseph Stack himself and 68-year-old Vernon Hunter, who was an employee, a longtime employee of the office who had just started his morning. I just can't believe that more people don't know that this happened. I lived in Austin for 8 years, and I never found out about this event until the last year that I lived there. So, yeah, I just wanted to make this TikTok to educate people, and yeah, it's a crazy and sad story.
This man, Justin Ross Harris, left his 1-year-old son in the back of his hot car while he went to work all day. He'd previously searched on his phone animals dying in hot cars. That can't be a coincidence, surely. But he claimed that it was a complete accident and he'd simply forgotten to drop him off at daycare. It was June 18, 2014 in Cobb County, and Justin had taken his son Cooper out for breakfast. He was then supposed to drop him off at daycare, but instead he drove straight to work, wound up the car windows and left Cooper strapped into his car seat. He went into work but actually came back out at around 12:30 and drove to the local Home Depot store to buy light bulbs. He claims that he didn't see or hear Cooper in the back seat. He then drove back to work and went back inside. Around 4:30 he came back out from work and got into the car, and this is when he discovered Cooper's lifeless body. He died from hypothermia and dehydration. It was 84 degrees in that car, and the medical examiner said that Cooper's death would have been slow and torturous. He would have experienced nausea, headaches, dehydration, overheating, seizures, and anxiety. Cooper actually had scratch marks on his skin where he'd been scratching himself due to the extreme heat. When police searched Justin's phone, they found searches relating to animals dying in hot cars. They also discovered that he'd been sending inappropriate, explicit messages to a teenage girl. The prosecution argued that Justin had left Cooper in his car intentionally as a way to get rid of him, so that he was then free to divorce his wife with zero responsibilities afterwards. Justin was found guilty of murder and child cruelty, and he was sentenced to life without parole. He was also given 12 years for felony attempt to commit sexual exploitation of children relating to the explicit texts. However, in June 2022, his murder charge was actually overturned, and 11 months later, the murder and child cruelty charges were dropped, along with his life sentence. He is still serving the 12 years for the explicit texts, but he's due to be released in just a couple of years.
Police ignored this girl's cries for help about a stalker, even ignoring a huge bag of terrifying weapons. What happened next is horrifying. Gracie Spinks from Chesterfield was just 23 years old when she was brutally murdered. A well-liked and hard-working girl, her future was looking really bright until it would be taken away from her in the most hideous way. In the months leading up to her death, she'd become quite concerned. So concerned that she reached out to police for help. Michael Sellers was 35 and her ex-colleague. Now, Gracie was very artistic, charismatic, and as I said, well-liked, and Michael became quite obsessed with her. 6 months prior, Gracie had declined Michael's romantic advances. It was then that he started to show even more worrying behaviour. In February 2021, Gracie rang police to tell them that she noticed Michael hanging around her stables. She would frequently go there alone to tend to her horse Paddy, and she obviously phoned police because she was very concerned. She warned police on the phone call that he could potentially kidnap someone. Now, police simply offered Michael words of advice and closed the inquiries. Worryingly, Michael had actually been dismissed from his workplace due to his concerning behaviour, and he had harassed a total of 8 women prior to Gracie. 4 of these women had raised concerns with their employer. Then a very disturbing find. Some dog walkers found a bag filled with weapons, and I can't obviously post it on TikTok, but if you just Google it, it really is horrifying. The people who found the bag were obviously concerned by it and they reported it to police. Despite the bag containing several knives, a hammer and an axe, the police treated it just simply as a case of found property. As I said, if you look at the picture, I have no idea why the police would not investigate that further. On the 18th of June 2021, something hideous was about to unfold. Gracie's mum last saw her at 7:30 a.m. when she left her home to go to the stables. As Gracie tended to her horse Paddy at Blue Lodge Farm in Duckmanton, Michael launched a brutal attack. He stabbed Gracie to death and fled the scene. She was found unconscious in the horse's field just after 8 a.m. and a witness saw a man running away. Initially, the emergency responders that arrived on the scene thought that Gracie had been kicked by her horse, but the true horrors would soon emerge. She was declared dead at 8:50 a.m. At 11 a.m, Michael was found dead in a nearby field. Now, Derbyshire police have recently apologised to Gracie's family after a jury at her inquest concluded she was unlawfully killed. The Gracie's Law petition was set up by her loved ones, and the aim of the petition was to raise awareness of the issues of stalking and the urgent need for government and police forces to take it more seriously. GracieSpinks.com has got a page where you can donate to this cause.
Ian Watkins, the former lead singer of the band Lost Prophets, could be the worst pedophile of all time. We already covered some of his story in part 1 of this series, but this is where it gets really dark and disturbing, so viewer discretion is definitely advised. So for years, Ian had lived a total rock star life, being the frontman of a famous band, touring the world, playing sold-out shows. But like I said during the end of the last part, in 2012, after he was accused by 6 different people of assaulting children, the police finally raided his home on drug charges and discovered one of the most disturbing things you can possibly find. The first thing that they discovered was a bunch of indecent images of children on his computer, and afterwards he was arrested on conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with a 1-year-old girl, possession and distribution of indecent images of children, and possession and distribution of extreme animal content, if you know what I'm saying. 2 female co-conspirators were also arrested and charged with some of these crimes, and this is where the story just gets so bad. Apparently, for a long period of time, Ian had been in a relationship with a woman and had been really dating her to get access to her baby. In one text message that Ian had sent this woman, he claimed, "If you are mine, so is your baby." And throughout this relationship, Ian would visit the mother, and the mother would allow Ian to do unspeakable things to this child. And the sickest part of all is that he actually recorded all of these things for his own personal pleasure. Some of this stuff is seriously so extremely hard to read and unpack, so I'm going to warn you again before we get into it. You can access all of the court documents online if you'd like to read further about this, but this is a letter that Ian sent to one of his lovers, and in this he's talking about their young child. The next thing I want to get from you are your phone number and lots of her pics. Think you can handle that? I guess we will see. Clock's ticking. So after all of this, I'm going to let you just read this. This is what ended up happening between Ian and this girl. And once again, this is so disturbing, but this is some more details about what happened. Ian and this child's mother had apparently teamed up to abuse the infant together. Keep in mind, this was a young child, a baby. And once again, Ian had videotaped all of this. This is all taking place on camera, over Skype calls, in person, in hotel rooms. This is just like, the most icky, disgusting case I've ever read about. One police officer actually investigating the case claimed that Ian was the most dangerous predator he had ever seen. In all these documents, there is just so much to read and so much that happened that, I can't even read out loud the contents of these articles, but they're online if you want to find them. Thankfully, Ian was sentenced to prison time, but it would only end up being 29 years, which in my opinion is not even close to as much as it should have been. I mean, this deserves life in prison at minimum. The two mothers of the children that they allowed Ian to abuse were also sentenced to prison time, 14 and 17 years respectively. But still, this is one of the most shocking cases of all time. I should also add in here this disturbing tweet from Jeffree Star considering the circumstances, and this sick tattoo someone got of Ian's mugshot.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This man lost his virginity to a corpse, and the details to this case are absolutely disturbing. We cover the darkest and most messed up things on this channel, but I have a feeling a lot of you will think this is one of the most disgusting and gut-turning ones yet. This is Kevin Davis, and he was from Texas. On March 27, 2014, in the morning, Kevin began to speak to his mother about some feelings he was feeling. He told her that he had a strong dislike towards people, but for the most part, he was unhappy with how his life was going so far, and told his mother that he wanted to take his own life, which took his mother back for a second. She then told Kevin she was very sad about this confession, and Kevin asked her for permission to end his life. Kimberly, who was his mother, told him she didn't want this for him and offered him some help, but also said if he wished to do this to himself, she can't stop him. And after hearing this, Kevin had a change of heart. Her response actually enraged him. He didn't want to end his own life now, he wanted to end his mother's. A fantasy that he actually had for a while. Later on, when Kimberly was relaxing on the couch in the living room, Kevin snuck up behind his mother and began to strangle her with a cord. Kimberly screamed for her life, and fearing that somebody would hear the commotion, Kevin then made a decision to use a more brutal method. He went and grabbed a hammer and repeatedly struck his mother in the head. Kevin hit his own mother in the head 20 times. He wanted to make sure his mother was 100% dead, so he went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife and stuck it into the cavities in the head that he created with the hammer, and then used the knife to mix around his own mother's brain. And curious to see what the brain felt like, he stuck his fingers and hands into the holes and began to feel around. And if that wasn't bad enough, Kevin did something after this that is so awful it doesn't even sound real. He carried his mother's body from the living room to the master bedroom, leaving behind a trail of blood. And once inside the bedroom, he removed his mother's clothes and had his way with her corpse. Yes, with her corpse. And after he was done, he wrote a couple of notes for the police, with one saying, "Chase me, sorry for the mess, KD." He then got on his bike and attempted to get out of town, but decided he didn't want to go on the run, and instead was actually going to turn himself in. Kevin then knocked on the door of a random house, and a couple then answered the door. Kevin then asked the people who lived there if he can use their phone to call the police, because he just murdered his own mother. Kevin then called and told the dispatcher his mother was dead in their house, and that he was the one who did it. Police arrived at the house that Kevin went to, and he was arrested. Police then went to Kevin's house and followed the trail of blood inside, and then found Kimberly's dead body in the bedroom. Kevin was questioned and confessed to everything he'd done with no emotion at all. The police asked why he killed his mother in such a brutal way, and Kevin responded with, absolutely nothing. I'm just a terrible, disgusting person. She was the best mother in the world. But Kevin also stated he wouldn't take back anything he'd done. He even described what his mother's brains felt like, describing it as a putty substance. He then told them about taking her to the bed and performing that awful, disgusting act, saying he often had fantasies about doing that to a lifeless body. He even said he waited a while for his sister to come home so he can do the same thing to her, but decided not to because he had his fill for that day. I can't imagine being the sister and hearing what your brother did to your mother and then later finding out he planned on doing the same thing to you. Kevin made it a point to let the police know he was aware of everything he was doing, and he said, "I'm not mentally disturbed, I'm sane." He then said he deserved 100 years in prison, and with a smile on his face, he said he never had sex up until that day. He then laughed and said, "I guess I lost my virginity to a corpse." And what's even more messed up is he said if he was ever released from prison that he would do it all over again. It took the jury 1 hour to get a verdict, and Kevin was given the maximum possible sentence, which was life in prison. But what is absolutely insane is that he is eligible for parole in 2044, which makes no sense, because he said if he was ever released, he would do the same exact thing. I've covered so many cases and some that are truly unforgettable, but I think this one is going to stick with me forever. The sheer brutality and messed up things Kevin did to his own mother is truly unbelievable. I know this is truly messed up, and I could imagine some of you can't handle this. So if you made it this far into the video, please let me know your thoughts on this entire case.
Do you notice anything odd about this last photo of this girl alive? It was 2012 and Alicia Bromfield from Illinois was 21 years old. She was a student at Western Illinois University, just one semester away from graduating. She was studying forensic psychology and criminal justice and was 6 months pregnant. She'd already picked the name Ava for her unborn baby girl. Now, although the father of the baby wasn't around, she was preparing for single motherhood. Little did she know, neither her nor her unborn child would survive much longer. 36-year-old Brian Cooper was Alicia's boss at Home Depot. The two seemed fairly close and sometimes met outside of work and walked Brian's dog. There was never anything romantic between them though. Brian was actually very abusive to Alicia. He would call her derogatory names in front of members of staff and shockingly even customers. He was even witnessed throwing things at her, but she felt that she had to stay in the job. She knew she was soon about to be a mother, so she was worried about the financial implications of not having a job. Brian continued to bully Alicia and make her life miserable. He would purposely make her work extra hours just so he could spend extra time with her. She actually started to report this to management, but nothing was ever done. In August 2012, he started pressuring her to attend his sister's wedding with him. She didn't want to go, but he threatened to sack her if she didn't. Her mum was really concerned about Alicia being forced to go to this wedding. Alicia reassured her, however, that she was simply going as a friend and that they'd be back the next day. Alicia's mum was comforted by the fact that Brian told Alicia they were going to be staying at the same hotel as the rest of the wedding party. This was the Sand Bay Resort in Wisconsin. However, this was a lie. On the 17th of August, the pair drove 4 hours to the hotel, and when they got there, Alicia realised that they weren't staying in the same hotel as everyone else. They got into an argument about this, and the argument escalated when Brian made sexual advances to Alicia. She told her mum on the phone that she was really fed up with how he was acting and that she'd lost her patience with him. She told Brian that they would go to the wedding together, but they would not remain friends afterwards. They went to the wedding together, and Brian got more and more drunk as the evening went on. Afterwards, they went back to the hotel and got into their separate beds for the evening. When Brian started harassing Alicia again, she again rejected him, and this time he launched a vicious attack. He dragged her to the ground and strangled her. She screamed out, "Think of the baby," but he didn't, and he killed her. He then AR'd her body as she lay deceased. The next morning, he showed up to a local petrol station and asked to use the phone. He rang police and admitted to intentionally killing her. He said, "I'm a good person besides what I did last night. Alicia's family is going to flip. Everyone is going to flip." Police raced to the scene and arrested him. They found Alicia's body nude in the hotel room with just a blanket covering her. It was later discovered that Brian had been so obsessed with Alicia that he'd actually been recording her with spy cameras. He was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and given 2 life sentences.
This is one of and had refused to let him in, but they knew that it was Maxim. Eventually, Maxim got into one of these trains, and that's when he confronted Joe. Maxim ended up stabbing Joe a number of times in the face and in the back of the head. But eventually, Joe was the hero, and he was the one that was able to bring Maxim Gelman down to the ground without the assistance of the New York Police Department. The New York Police Department lied and stated that they were the ones that took Gelman down. But Joe was the one who took the killer down all along. On the latest episode of our show about this crime, we actually interviewed Joe Lozito, heard his side of the story, and wow does he drop some bombshells. Just search Murder in America on any streaming platform and you'll find our
A new cartel video was just released and it's absolutely brutal. On April 7th, 2024, a new cartel video was released that is extremely awful. It shows the brutal execution of a rival cartel member. The video is very disturbing and awful to watch, so this is a massive trigger warning. The video is shot in good quality, which makes it even worse, and as you play the video, you are met with 3 cartel members. 2 of the men can be seen inside the truck, and the other can be seen outside of the door open. The cartel members were just relaxing and having a good time with each other, like anybody would when they're hanging with their friends. They were joking, and it seems the video was taken to be posted on one of their social medias. A song is also playing over the video, and the song is a house-type catchy song. The first couple seconds of the video is just a normal cartel flexing clip. However, as you can assume, things take a very dark turn. Shortly after the video was taken, the 3 members were captured by another cartel and were assumed to be killed. But you only see one of the 3 men killed on camera. The video of the 3 cartel members having fun was edited into the video by the killers as a way to mock them. It shows the clip of the men having fun, and then a black slide comes up with the text on it that says after. So the video is edited as a before and after video technically. After the segment of the men having fun and the after slide, it then shows one of the men in a truly disturbing and horrific situation. It's shot in the middle of the night in the woods, and you see the captive has been subdued and most likely tied up, as you don't see him fighting to escape the awful situation he's in. The man is in a hole or a ditch, and he's been buried under a pile of debris and branches, and his head is sticking out above the debris with a tire around his head. A cartel member then walks up to the victim with some sort of plastic container in his hand, and then pours clear liquid into the hole and all over the poor victim's face. Once the liquid has been poured, the cartel member filming then gets closer to the captive, and he looks up to the camera with complete fear all over his face. Another cartel member then puts dry sticks around the victim's head, and what happens next is truly awful. One of the cartel members then drops a match into the debris pile, and it goes up in flames as the victim is very much alive and conscious. The music that has been playing in the video then stops, and you hear the fire snapping and the cartel members talking and laughing at this awful scene. At first, all you hear is that, but then suddenly you hear quite possibly some of the worst screams ever. It's a mix of screaming and roaring, and it's just awful. The screams get deeper and deeper, and as the fire continues to engulf the victim, his screams get more and more violent until he can no longer scream. He has to inhale the extreme heat and also the toxic black smoke from the burning tire, which causes the victim to make very loud exhale sounds. It's very hard to explain this sound, but it can be described as a life leaving a person's body. You also see the burning debris pile move as the victim struggles to get out, but it's way too late. After a short amount of time, the man's exhales become quieter and quieter, and then there is no sounds whatsoever besides the fire burning as the cartel members look on. This video might not sound that bad, but trust me, it's extremely awful. The sounds a person makes while burning alive is quite possibly the worst sound to be heard in my opinion. These cartel videos I explain are never good, and as always, I don't recommend watching or searching for these videos.
This schoolboy stabbed his teacher to death in front of a classroom full of students. 61-year-old Anne Maguire was a Spanish teacher teaching in Leeds. She'd actually worked at the school for 40 years and she was only 5 months off retirement. However, in April 2014, something absolutely horrific happened. One of her students was 15-year-old Will Cornick. He'd always been described as a smart student who never really caused any trouble. Classmates regarded him as a polite student, but after he got diagnosed with diabetes, his personality seemed to change. In 2013, he tried to join the army, but because of his diagnosis, he was rejected. Being in the army had been his dream, so this was really upsetting for him. After failing to complete his Spanish homework, he was given detention by Anne. He also expressed a wish to her that he wanted to drop Spanish, but she wouldn't let him, which only angered him more. He began to develop a deep-rooted grudge against Anne. Shockingly, he reportedly messaged his friends on Facebook asking if one of them would kill her for him for £10. During one school day, halfway through his Spanish class, Will decided to get up and attack Anne with a knife. The classmates watched on in horror as he chased her out of the classroom. When there, another teacher heard her screams and tried to shield Anne from any more blows from him. Will then allegedly returned to his class and told his classmates how it was a shame that he hadn't killed her. However, Anne did actually pass away from her injuries. Will later admitted that he did plan also to kill 2 other teachers. One of them was actually pregnant at the time. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years.
This guy is one of the most awful serial killers there has ever been, and I feel like he's never talked about. In my opinion, this guy's worse than Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. Hi Meg, I talk about true crime. Let's get into the story of the Butcher, the worst serial killer Canada has ever seen. Robert Pickton was born October 24th, 1949, in British Columbia, Canada. Robert had quite a bad upbringing. His dad was very abusive. He actually grew up on a pig farm. From a really young age, him and his brother had to work countless hours on this pig farm, and then they were forced to go straight to school without taking a shower or anything. Because he was showing up to school unwashed, Robert started getting bullied, and they gave him the nickname Stinky Piggy. As Robert grew older, he was said to be very quiet, but he apparently sometimes had these weird bursts of bizarre behavior. These bursts would come out of nowhere, and he would just start acting really strange. In 1996, Robert's brother opened up a kind of charity thing. The charity was started to try to make more money for their pig farm. It was called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And what they would do is they would hold huge parties and raves to try and raise money. And I'm not joking when I say huge parties and raves. 17,000 people were said to have shown up at one point. 17,000 people at once. Sex workers and biker gangs would join these parties as well. But for Robert, it all started going downhill in 1997 when he attempted to murder a girl. I don't usually do this in these videos, but a lot of you ask what blush I use, and this is the blush I use. It's usually £10 on the TikTok shop, but it's on for $5 right now. So if you click right here, you can get it. I just ordered kind of a peachy version of this. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I just saw they were on offer, and you guys ask about these all the time. So get your hands on them for cheap while you can. So Robert attempts to murder a woman for the first time that we know of. According to her statement, he attempted to handcuff her, and then he started stabbing her multiple times before she managed to get away. This should have been the thing that got him on police radar, but he was able to get the charges dropped because the woman he attacked was on a lot of drugs at the time, and Robert used that to come up with a story. He told police, like, she was hitchhiking, I was just trying to help her, and she attacked me. And they believed him because she was on drugs. And unfortunately, for the next 60 women he would kill, he was let go. And he was able to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get him caught next time. He developed a plan and started killing a bunch of women. And Robert was really, really good at staying under the radar. Now, what did he do exactly? Let me tell you. Because it's disturbing. First of all, he always went for hitchhikers, addicts, or prostitutes. And what he would do is he would promise them money, drugs, accommodation, anything to get them back to his farm. Once he got them back, he would then shoot or strangle them to death. And this next part is why he was given the name the Butcher. He would take the victims' bodies, chop them up, and feed them to his pigs. Now, if you're not aware of this already, pigs will literally eat anything, everything. So the evidence was just, bye. They were getting rid of the evidence for him. All of a sudden, there is an increase in missing women in the area. But sadly, because he only went after sex workers or addicts or hitchhikers, no one cared. And this always makes me so mad with cases like these. Like, they're still human beings, but No bodies were showing up, so there was no crime, no body, no crime. But as the numbers started rising, people were kind of getting a bit worried. A group of people that weren't the police actually got a list together of all of the names of these young women who were missing. They brought that to the police and were like, "Do you see now?" And that's when the investigation actually began into finding out what happened to these girls. And all of these girls had one person in common: Robert Pickton. He was the only person whose name continuously came up when they were looking for these girls. Police needed a way to get onto the farm with a warrant without him knowing about it and hiding all the evidence first. And so they heard that he had possession of an illegal firearm. And so they used that as the cover-up to get onto his property. On the property, they found multiple items that belonged to these missing women, along with some blood-stained clothing and tiny bone fragments. Now, things aren't looking too good for Robert, but because the pigs had eaten all the evidence, basically all of it, they were only able to charge him with the murder of 6 women. And so he got 6 counts of murder. When he got arrested, he actually said that he killed 49 women and that he was sad that he didn't get to round up to 50. What the hell, Robert? What does he want the police officer to say, like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you"? No! He was arrested in 2002, and this trial was huge. Of course, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. But guys, that's not the worst part of this story, because I'm getting to that now. One element of the story that I kept out until now is that Robert sold the meat of his pigs to people who lived around the area. These pigs, who ate the remains of 60 women, were sold to his neighbors. When I say neighbors, I just mean people who live in the area. So like secondhand cannibalism. I could never eat pig again if that was me. So yeah, they were pretty disturbed and freaked out by this information, which is totally understandable and just totally disgusting. After a huge search of his property, police now believe that the number of women Robert killed was in the 60s. 60 women. 60 mother, daughters, wives. It's insane. It really annoys me with cases like these. I know it was like in 2002 and things have changed, but have they? I find that a lot of cases like these that I cover always start with, "Oh, all these women were going missing, but they were sex workers, but they were drug addicts, who cares?" And it's like, it's insane to me that like they're not seen as equals to any other woman walking on the street, but whatever. Hopefully that changes. And for those wondering, I have actually covered this story before, but the quality of the video was so bad that I couldn't keep it up anymore. Like, it really bothered me to watch back, so I thought I would remake it in a higher quality way. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and have a wonderful day. My heart goes out to every single one of the victims, their families, and people who cared about them, and I hope Robert rots in jail. Anyways, this is not a good representation of Canadians. We're actually really nice people. I'll see you all in the next video. Love you guys. Bye!